All right, we are recording. Well, because this is going to be played after the screening, we'll have finished watching the screening of the movie Forks Over Knives. And for everyone in the audience who does not know, we are recording this with Mr. T. Colin Campbell, Center for Nutritional Studies.
Correct.
And it's just like I said before, it's an honor to be able to have you here. I love that this is going on. And I just finished for everyone in the audience, the Center for Nutritional Studies course. And I wish that it was the standard American diet, that we would probably end diabetes, obesity, and cancer in a year if everybody was on this and put the entire Western medicine out of business. No offense to anybody who is in the business, but it's profiting off of a lot of sickness right now. So is there anything before we start on questions from the group that you wanted to share initially? Any thoughts that you've been having since you've been aware of this, this meeting?
Not in particular. As you know, I was in the Forks Over Knives. Brian Wendell and Lee Faulkner and John Corey, they came to me way back when, wanted to know if they had read the China study at the time. They were talking about doing a film. That's how it sort of got started. And I told them about my friend, Dr. Esselstyn, and there went from there on. John Corey had experience in movies. He had made some himself. And Lee Faulkner, the guy was the script writer. He was outstanding. And Brian was kind of the pusher behind the scene, you know, getting it organized. So it was a nice occasion. 2011 it came out. And,
yeah, I saw it back then in Chicago. Some people, but I didn't get it, you know, then because I think I was just in the habit of, like every other vegan, just going to the, you know, places that we go and eating our vegan junk food. I was into the raw diet a little bit back then, but I'd like to see this, the whole food, plant-based, come out a lot more, and I think it will. You know, we just got to keep on doing meetings like this. So I do have some questions I want to start with real quick and easy one. Okay. Mark asks, what would you say your top 5 or so favorite whole food plant-based foods are?
Well, you know, I've been in this business now for going on 67 years. That's in the profession itself. If I go back to my graduate school days at Cornell. So I've seen a lot of the complexities. I was very much involved in national policy development. I've seen that part of it. It's a huge, huge, huge base. I mean, it's the whole of humanity in a sense we're talking about. So in that context, I've narrowed these ideas down to just 2 little simple little ideas, but I think they capture most of the thing. Number 1, eat whole foods. Number 2, eat plant foods. If we just remember those 2 very simple things, eat plant foods and try to make them as whole as much as possible, and you're home free. So to answer the question, as far as what my favorite are, that wouldn't necessarily relate to anyone else. I mean, just as long as you're eating whole plant foods, that's vegetables, grains, legumes, if you will. Some nuts is fine, as far as I'm concerned. Cereal grains, and yeah, I said that. So I don't know. You get some. I like spinach, broccoli. You know, like the greens. My wife has been a terrific partner in this. We've been married now; it'll be 60 years shortly, and so she really bought into this and really changed our cooking. We had 5 children, now a bunch of grandchildren. So she's been the matriarch, you know, making this thing work. And so I just eat what she gives us, essentially. I don't cook myself, but every day we basically have a salad to start with. And that's the usual things in it, lettuce and so forth, tomatoes and all the rest of it. So we have a grain. I have oatmeal in the morning, and That's pretty standard, I think, for most of us in this business. Oatmeal with fresh fruit on it in the summertime. Fresh fruit if possible in the wintertime. Otherwise, we use frozen fruit that we have picked, in upstate New York. And so there you have it. Just that's the hot food. I mean, we can have some cold cereal occasionally, but I kind of like the oatmeal. So I can't list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 foods. Just sticking with that idea, eating, mixing and matching them, eating the foods the way we like them. Each person has their own preference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mark will appreciate it because he's a big cruciferous guy. He likes those broccolis and things. Yeah. His other question is, what do you generally find are some of the greatest difficulties for people starting to go on a whole food plant-based diet?
Just staying on it. It's very clear. And we've had I've been involved with a lot of people, including my own son who co-authored the book with me. He's now a professor at University of Rochester Medical Center. And he's doing some of these studies now too. And that's what he continues to do at McDougall, Ornish, all of them. Here's the biggest issue. There's lots of people who will do it for 10 days, maybe. We call it jump starts. They'll stay with it and they'll see the benefits. And it'll be quite clear to them, many of them. It's convincing, all that sort of stuff. But believe it or not more than about 5% of those people will stay with it going forward. So the question is, why do people actually learn about it, feel the benefits, and then not stay with it? I think here's the answer, I think. At least it seems to work. When people start doing this, they need to stay on it, fairly religiously, thoroughly, for maybe at least a month, let's say. Some people maybe a little bit longer. What happened when I'm saying that number because that's our experience, but what really happens, our taste preferences change. Our taste preferences change. At that point, we then go back and look at what we did, a few weeks ago or something. We wonder what in the world, what do we eat that stuff for?
Yeah, exactly.
There's another motivation too, it's the ethical. And so, as you know, for the vegan community, the ethical considerations are exceptionally important. People who are in it for that reason, they will tend not to want to eat animal food. Forget it. They're not going to do it for ethical reasons. But for those, all the rest of the folks, just kind of stay with it for a month, maybe a little bit longer for some folks. Taste preferences change. And I can say that because I came from a farm. Most of my life early on was all eating the typical American diet. And so we just gradually changed over about, I don't know, a decade. It was bit by bit as I was learning the information we were getting out of the lab and stuff like that. So some folks will take longer. Some can do it tomorrow and stay with it. But on average, stick to it for a month or so. And
I'm guilty of that myself because I've tried things. I'm like, yeah, I tried it, but it didn't work. But I didn't try it long enough. And right. I'd also learned something in my meditation practice from my teacher. When everybody's like lapsing on, same thing with meditation. They want, oh, why is it not working? Well, have you been doing it every day? No. And he says, well, the number one word is priorities. I have no choice. I have to do it. I have, multiple health conditions. I need to stay on it and as much as possible. And I am aware of that transitionary phase where I've even had some things that had salt in it when I ate out, and I was like, I can't eat it, or I had oil in something the other day without confessing where I had it at. I was like, it's just so greasy. And it made me nauseous after I ate it because I haven't had oil at home in 2 months. I don't even buy Vegenaise anymore, or tofutti sour cream. I make my own, now at home, and I can taste the chemicals in the food when I eat out now too. I think the biggest problem for me was the refined flours, because hardly anything's made out of whole grains. You got to go read every label on that. But let's see this. So that's Mark's questions. I have, pronouncing it correctly, hopefully, Jeannie Eisel has a question. We are mostly a vegan group. What do you suggest might be the biggest challenges for this group of people? Probably the same thing, sticking with it. or for
Well, it means social challenges,
for
restaurant.
vegans transitioning to plant-based, the whole food plant-based?
Yeah, well, let me speak to that just briefly. This is not terribly a popular idea with some, I'm sure, in the vegan community, maybe, but I'm just being honest about it. I came from a farm, as many people know. I was on the typical Western diet. When I was in graduate school, during my doctorate, I did a dissertation on advancing the consumption of more animal protein. The first teaching course I had in graduate school was actually called Feeds and Feeding. That's feeding livestock. I mean, I was up to here, the typical American way. That's the way it was.
Yeah.
Who questioned it?
Yeah.
Then I was in the Philippines, as you know, and there I saw something that was kind of odd. This animal protein thing that we all kind of worshipped didn't look like it was exactly right. So I changed. And that changed over time. I forget your first question. I'm wandering here.
What do you suggest might be the biggest challenges for
yeah.
group of vegans going whole food plant-based?
Okay, so in any case, it came around a time when in the late 1970s, I was on a government panel at that time. And it was the panel that determined who gets the research money, who doesn't. It was for NIH. And that panel there was about 12, 13 of us. Everybody was on a nutrition and cancer panel. I was the only one there on nutrition. So my friends in cancer and oncology, if you will, and chemical carcinogenesis, we started getting some applications that mentioned nutrition a little bit. So I was the only one on the committee, and they asked me if I'd take some time and describe what is usually meant by nutrition. So at that time, mind you, 78, 79, I did not want to use the vegetarian, to be honest about it. Because it's not that popular with most folks. Very popular with those who buy into the idea, obviously. So I wanted to keep them on board. I at the time was still typical, very Western. So in describing that, I didn't want to use the word vegetarian. The vegan word wasn't even around, and so I had to come up with something that had some meaning scientifically, so that my friends could appreciate this is a science-based idea. So I came up with the word plant-based, just to try to jump through that hoop a little bit. A little bit later, 2 or 3 years later, when I was involved in the government in this particular case on vitamin supplements, looking at nutrients singly, it was whole food that mattered. So then I put the two together, whole food, plant-based. That didn't catch hold too much. I published it a little bit, but not until, maybe now, not maybe 5, 6, 10, 8 years ago, maybe. That word plant-based is going around the world. Okay, now, and then I have to tell you, sorry that lengthy discussion, but I did not want to use as I say, the word, the V words. Since then, obviously, I've had a great deal of appreciation, for the vegetarian vegan movement. I'm sort of, in many ways, I'm on the same page. I'm on the same page. But I tend not to use the word because what my interest in this thing is, since I was in policy development quite a lot, both here and abroad, I want to sell the rest of the world on this idea. And so I want the world to know from all different kinds of persuasions. I know if I can talk about the science in a way that is indisputable and people look at it, I don't care what their sort of philosophical, even political or economic considerations are, going into this, in this world, if they see the science being as clear as what I believe it is, and I can describe it that way, then we can make progress. We can make progress. I won't give his name at the present time, but one of the leaders in the vegan community in this country, one of the one or two, he called me up one day about 4 or 5 years ago, and he just told me this after China study. He said he just wanted to tell me. I didn't know him that well. Just wanted to tell me. He says, your book, the China study, has done more for the vegan movement than all the rest of us put together. He didn't particularly want to know why. He just wanted to say, whatever you're doing, keep going. I mean, very kind. I appreciate the comment. But the reason I say that now is because I'm really convinced more than ever that if we want to make this movement go forward in the world, and that's where it needs to go. If we want it to go forward, we have to start out with something that's really fundamental, inarguable, It applies to all the various interests because we have to change the world as to what we eat. It's that big. Because like for the environment, for example, right now, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And the best way to tackle that problem, the most productive way, if we could just get people convinced, eat the right food. I mean, our eating animals by the billions, I mean, it's ridiculous. Just supposedly for the purpose, whether subconscious or conscious, so just for the purpose of making sure we get the protein from them, that turns out to be a nonsensical idea, but it's very foundational throughout the world. And it turns out the protein from animals, we don't need a drop of that, not a gram.
Yeah.
We can get all the protein we need from plants. But the animal protein was always called high quality. High quality. And so that begs the question, why do they call it high quality? Well, I can tell that story too. I mean, that was almost part of my thesis at the time, 65 years ago. It's just the fact that of the protein we consume, more of it is retained during a test period. And in animal food, we retain more than plant food. And some people go, oh, that's good. That's high quality. I want to retain more. This is really important, et cetera, because it gives faster rate of growth.
Yeah, because
it also causes heart disease and cancer and stuff like that too. So that whole notion of protein being only from animals, that's part of our consciousness, almost without even saying it. I'm talking about the larger society. Once we get to establish for everyone to know, here's the science on that. And I have my presentation and the data and all that I'm familiar with. It is so absolutely convincing. We do not need to eat animals for any reason under the sun. None. There's no scientific justification, for example. So I kind of like to stick with that phrase, whole food, plant-based.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Whole food, that means kind of staying away from the salt, sugar, and fat. If you're the refined sugars, that's why whole grains is a good deal. But when we start taking the flour out, refined flour, that's not exactly what we want. In the case of the oils and plants and stuff like that, it's fine in the plants, peanuts and legumes, in fact, and coconut and so forth. They got some little extra oil in them. That's fine, because in that particular form, we don't need to worry about it. If we take it out and put it in a bottle like we do,
no fiber,
then we got trouble.
% fat,
Yeah, because in that case, that kind of oil actually is what we call pro-inflammatory. It's just different than it was in the plant. A lot of that's why the whole concept comes from. You got, when it's in the plant, nature knows what to do with it. She's pretty smart. She's been doing this for a few million years. And I'd like to say it this way, all that Mother Nature is asking us to do, to serve ourselves, eat the plant that was provided by nature, by her. And that's really what it comes down to. Mixing and matching and that sort of thing is great because they tend to have somewhat different properties, obviously, different biological properties especially. And so there you have it. It's so simple. It is so darn simple. And I don't think we too often we get caught up in little details here and there. Somebody will argue, I know an apple is better than an orange or whatever, or they'll talk about it kind of in silly ways like that. It's not important. It may be important to the person who's doing it because they might know something about a particular food that might cause them a little allergy here and there or something of that sort. That's okay. But from a broader perspective, all we need to do is pick and choose from the buffet that nature provided to us. That's all. We can cook it, we can chop it up, we can do this, we can do that. But when we start taking things out of the plant, like oil, or taking out of the plant the refined carbohydrates like sugar, and we mix and match it, throw in some flavors, what do we have? We've got a bun, a sweet roll. And that's not exactly the whole plant. No. So sorry for that long answer, but all these things are so connected. I
Yeah,
can't get rid of it.
especially when the mentality of eating a single food item because of a protein, because of an ingredient in it, like protein.
Right.
Protein, and then everybody's so brainwashed with the word protein and meat, and I don't understand. I get nature, but I don't understand how our body actually, is used to making by evolution long chain amino acids from the plants we eat. It's not made for digesting, assimilating, and eliminating the long chain amino acids in the meat that, people are eating protein for. And that's why there's, our body's kind of tripped up. Maybe there's, it creates a little stress in it and stuff. So I could see that. But some people, we just get used to it, just like alcohol or any other vice or unhealthy thing. I say, nothing's wrong with me. They just keep doing it. So it's like, banging yourself in a hand with a hammer. It hurts, but you've been doing it so long, you don't even pay attention to the pain anymore. Let's see.
Everyone likes to hear good things about their bad habits.
Yeah, I like to make them up myself. I'm trying to break up. I try to eat out very little now. I used to eat out all the time. I think what we need is some whole food, plant-based restaurants, places that don't use, or there's been a few. Mike had a local place here, Indian place, doing a monthly all vegan Indian buffet, which is outstanding, 16 items. We're trying to get that back right now. Hopefully he's in the audience after this movie and he's seeing this. So let's see what else we got here. What are the main changes? I'm going to go to my questions because we're getting short on time.
It's okay. We can run over a little bit if you want, but
okay.
I got minutes.
So I was under the impression, that certain things, brainwashed by, Western media and stuff, cause obesity, diabetes, and cancer, like overeating for diabetes and eating sugar for, overeating for obesity, eating sugar for diabetes, and eating an acidic diet for cancer. What is the relationship between all three of these and our consumption of fat?
Well, fat is one component. Obviously, when it's part of the whole food, then it's good because it works with the protein or carbohydrate. It all kind of works together. So, and I could talk all day long about how those interact, but the important thing to remember is that in the whole food form, they do interact. If they're coming from plants, they interact in a very nice way. We don't need to worry about it too much. When we take them out, then we can talk about those components doing specific things that aren't so good. I mean, you mentioned sugar. I mean, sugar is basically, it's good in the plant. It's a carbohydrate. It's one of the main components of the carbohydrate class. And the carbohydrate class includes the fiber, includes the sugar, includes the starch, all these kind of things. Under those circumstances, that's the main source of our energy. So, it's good, okay? But when you take the sugar out, like refined flours or refined sugars at the table, table sugar, stuff like that, then it's standing by itself, and we don't get exactly the same effect. And the same thing with oil. When the oil is in the plants, it's good. It's made up of what we call polyunsaturated oils, for example, in the plants. There's animals is more saturated, and plants are polyunsaturated. Animals are saturated, and in the plant, that polyunsaturated is called good oil. That's quite a history to this story, by the way. It's called good oil, but the reason it was good is because it's in plants. You take it out, extract it from the plants, put it in a jar, have a bottle of oil, use it that way. It's just different. It doesn't have the same properties. So, it's pro-inflammatory, as I say. It tends to increase the risk for cancer, by the way. It can cause, diabetes. You put that package together in that particular form. When people who are getting diabetes, for the most part, are eating processed foods, lots of sugar and white flour and some oil, that's what they're doing. They're not getting the whole thing. And in that case, there's a number of things going wrong. A number of guys, it's kind of hard to, but what happens, you may have heard the expression that Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher, said over 2,000 years ago, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That was really profound. That's over 2,000 years ago. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Unfortunately, over the years, we started working on parts. That really became fashionable in the late 1800s, because if you could take up one thing at a time out of the hundreds of thousands of things in food, you take up one thing at a time, you could give it a name, and maybe you could get intellectual property protection. You could sell it. Yep. There you have it. It's the beginning of the whole Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, divide and conquer. Yeah.
And so we have to return to, as I say, eating the food the way it was, the way it's grown, and just staying away from. We don't have any right to be abusing animals the way we do, because we just, in that case, there's no scientific basis for consuming animal-based food, period. There's none.
The movie Game Changers came out a few years ago, if you've heard of that one, and that showed the fat in the blood cells of certain, they shook it up in a little vial or something. It showed how, your blood looks, or plasma or something looks after consuming chicken or meat. And then the other guys were eating the plant-based version, and it wasn't so cloudy, so that's just a sign there of what animal-based saturated fat will do to you. I wonder, I have a personal thing. Was there ever been, have you ever had a bunch of whole food plant-based people tested exclusively on their whole food oils, like eating nuts? People that don't.
Right, it's a good question, by the way. The way that medicine works, and I'm really in the biomedical area, medical research essentially. The way it works is that the whole industry is founded on the principle we can take up one thing at a time, and then we can test it in what was called a randomized controlled trial. You got one group just, without that substance, the other groups got the substance, and then you very carefully organize these two groups and follow them up and see what happens. That's the randomized controlled trial, and that's considered to be the gold standard. It is the gold standard for one thing at a time. But quite frankly, at a very foundational level, randomized controlled trial is not the way to do things, because you just asked here, the whole food. It's very difficult to do a trial where you randomize people. They have to go to one group or the other. You can tell these people here, you've got to eat meat and all that sort of stuff. Well, maybe they don't want to. And the other group say you can only eat vegetables. No, it doesn't quite work that way. So that kind of research, to answer your question, has been almost impossible to do. But there are some other ways of really understanding this information. Other ways, you just follow people who, what we call retrospectively or even prospectively, you follow what they've been eating over time. Then you see what kind of diseases and conditions they get. You put the whole package together. Then you do some research. That was my area. You do research and find out, what did all these things do? What's their mechanisms? Now that's an enormously exciting sort of venture, because then you can see what does what, in many ways. But to come back to your question again, there's no randomized controlled trial that can be done unless a group of people just doing that. The closest that is happening right now is just kind of off the book, off the trail. I've got friends like Esselstyn and many others. They take a group of people with heart disease, for example, or maybe a group of people with diabetes. They switch their diet. That's all they do. And it's remarkable how fast that works. It starts working within 24 to 48 hours. Serum cholesterol drops like a rock. Blood sugar, in the case of diabetes, drops like a rock. And in fact, they're usually on medications at that point. And if they don't get off their medications, especially with diabetes, they can run into hypoglycemic shock. That's how powerful the diet is. So in reality, if you've got a group of people who have a problem, one sort or another, switch them over to this diet, most of them, see some benefit real quick. Like they start losing some weight along the way. And that impresses a lot of people. We call that jump starts programs. And that's one thing that some of the communities around the country are now doing. What they do is they get a group of people and say, okay, let's try this. We're going to work together on this. We're going to do this for a week or two. We're going to keep some records. That you should be done under the care of a physician, by the way. I don't want to be too glib about that. So, so they can monitor the changes that may occur. That's called jump starts. That never gets published, so it doesn't get recognized. So when you ask a question, has this been done before? Not really, because the randomized controlled trials are worthless in my estimation, because we're looking at one thing at a time, and that's not what a whole food plant-based diet is. If we do a jump start, you get this group over here all eating this here, and this group over. If you do something like that, or just take a group of people in everyday life, they're all on the typical Western American diet. They got a problem. They come in and start doing this, and as I say, within days you start seeing changes. They do it for 10 days, 15 days, or something, and they see remarkable changes. And they get really impressed. Now, having told you all that background, my own son, my youngest son actually, who wrote a book with the China study, he was an actor. He was in theater at the time. He's a good writer. That's why he came to work with me. But then he decided to go to med school. So he went back to med school. He got his doctorate, did his residency. Now he's on the faculty at a medical center. He's doing this now he's got an organized study with women and stage 4 breast cancer. Can you imagine? These are women with stage 4 breast cancer. What he's doing, and they're all on medications, unfortunately. He's taking one group of women and switching them over to this diet just to see what happens. That'll give us some information. I think he's almost about done. But that kind of study is difficult to do and to get funded, because the funding authorities, in fact, for the medical system, they don't particularly care hearing about this dietary idea, to be honest about it, because that's anti to what they're doing. They're solving problems through the use of drugs.
Yeah.
And the alternative is, let's eat the right food. We don't need the drugs, kind of thing. So there is in our society this competition between two points of view as far as human health is concerned. One, eat the right food, get some exercise, get some sunshine, do all the good things, right? But eat the right food. And then you stay well and you don't need drugs, or very little drugs. The other is, okay, I'll eat what I want to eat, but I'll live with the diseases I get. We have some drugs, we'll take care of it. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. The side effects of drugs in the United States, the side effects is, according to one estimate, the third leading cause of death in this country.
I believe
just the side effects.
Yeah.
Well, to be on the safe side, you can say it's the fourth leading cause, depending on how you write things. But it's amazing, this track that this way we've come down, through our years and learning about things. We end up eating the wrong food, right? We even pay for the production of the wrong food. That makes us sick. And we have the belief in our minds that somehow we'll take care of that when the time comes. That's nonsense.
I like your analogy you have in your course, which we'll talk about at the end, on how our diet, what we eat, turns the switches on or off for disease in our body. Is exactly poignant to what you were just saying. Right. And same relationship to the single ingredients of things like protein and meat and calcium and dairy and blah blah blah. And then there's the subject of supplements. What supplements work? They're all these ingredients of things like protein or like collagen. I don't think we can get any more collagen in our body, even if we eat a jar of it. And people are all stuck on eating, collagen and putting it in there. I see the commercials all the time. And I looked up the evidence. There is no scientific evidence on any of these supplements proving anything. Which segues in, and this is kind of tying in, this is like a two-part question of my own. So if that's the case, then I've been on B12 deficient for about a decade. I used to get the shots and they had to get me up to middle of the range. And then they had me on the cyanocobalamin or the methylcobalamin. And then there's like the fortified things. I gave up supplementing. I won't even do it anymore. I have never had a symptom loss. or symptom at all from any of it in 10 years. Not sure how long it takes to actually get it. Maybe I'm playing with danger here, but my number's been down to like, I think the range is 250 to 1100 or something. And, 500-600 is right in the middle. Mine's been down to like 150 and it hasn't gone any lower than that. So I don't know if I need it. Honestly, I just keep eating this same diet and I get, greens and fruits and all these whole things. We don't have it in our environment anymore. We would have to get it from supplements or a pill or something. Well, is there a cost and payoff to even taking a supplement like B12?
That's the only one for which there's some evidence that, it might be okay because plant foods don't have B12. That comes from microorganisms in the soil.
Yes.
And it can be on the plants, when we take it like from the garden and stuff like that. So there was some evidence, very weak, I should say, that people who are deficient in B12, they can run into a problem, a sort of neurological kind of problem, maybe. It's rare. So I've kind of bought into that, sort of gone along with it, not with any degree of interest, quite frankly, because, the whole vitamin supplement industry started in the 1980s, or I should say restarted. It was before that, but in the 1980s, they really took it up wholesale. And they started out, there's a group of entrepreneurs at the time. They got together and they wanted to, and the reason they did that was because they were relying on a report that I was a co-author of for the National Academy of Science called Diet, Nutrition, and Cancer. That report was the most sought after report in the history of the National Academy in 1982, right? There's been a lot of news. All the congressional people had it and so forth and so on. And I was on TV quite a bit. And at the time, and so then some entrepreneurs, I say, some people thought they could make money with this idea. So they took our report, because we talked about the different nutrients in food, you can do this, that, and something else. They thought, well, stick it in a pill. So they started this idea that they're going to make some pills out of these individual nutrients. They were making claims that were not warranted. The National Academy got very upset with them, and they sued them. And they took them to court. That's a federal court, the Federal Trade Commission, to sue them to stop that activity. And so the Academy asked me to be their principal witness. So I was in the stand for 3 years as that industry was starting.
Wow.
And I was the one being asked to examine their claims, which I did. And, with my research back in the lab, plus that experience, I really did come to know. That's part of the idea of the whole thing. What I really came to know, when you take the nutrient out of the food, we got some good studies on this. It does something different. It may do exactly the opposite, what it does what's in the food. So I was not a fan of that group. They got kind of upset with me. And I wasn't going along with their stuff. But they gradually changed. That was during the 80s. In the early 90s, they got around to sort of changing some of the regulations because of political influence. So the industry really took off like a shot. Now it's something like, I don't know what it is, a $30-40 billion industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had advertised that stuff on TV. We're the only country, we're the only country in the world that advertises drugs on TV. And supplements are kind of like drugs in many ways. It's a reductionist idea. So, it really, I get carried away with this, maybe some folks, but the corporate influence has been so strong in taking this information that we have that's provided by nature, we can all use, we can use it very sensibly. They want to take it out and turn it into a profit machine somehow. And so they got the supplement thing, and I answer your question. I don't take supplements. I don't take supplements. In fact, I was just on a podcast with a professor of oncology at Yale University just here a week or so ago. I didn't know this gentleman, but he's had a whole lifetime. He got my book and he got interested in it. So he's been working on cancer patients. That was his job. But he was the leading person at Yale on questions concerning nutrition. I'm at Cornell, he's at Yale. So we started talking and compared notes, and I thought we were going to argue a great deal. We didn't. We turned out that both of us really agree. He's worked with cancer patients for 40 years. I'm in the lab, and we came out the same place. We came out the same place that we're going to have another podcast coming up with sometime soon, talking about how food maybe can be used for cancer patients, whether it's the nutrients coming out and use them in pills, or it's pills themselves, or whether it's the whole food. Go back to your first question. So and I told you this because he brought up to me a fact that I didn't know. I'm going to have to look this up. We're talking about B12. And he started reviewing 2 or 3 studies he's familiar with, that B12, the one that I was inclined to give a pass to, in fact, now has been shown to have some downside. So that was the last one on my list that I might have allowed for, some use, but I'm going to go back and confirm it for myself. But I don't see any reason for any supplements whatsoever for anything.
Reminds me of that study you mentioned or maybe it was your son that mentioned that study that was done on the cancer patients, and that supplement that claimed that, what's that in carrots? Beta carotene cures cancer or something?
That's right. It's that one.
10 that over a year, 10 people that had cancer, they gave the supplement to, and 10 people that had cancer that they gave a carrot to. And that at the end of the year, the people who got the supplements, cancer got worse, and the people who got the carrot, cancers diminished or stayed the same.
That was lung cancer. That was lung cancer amongst smokers.
Maybe we should do a commercial with just a carrot. Carrot saves lives, instead of the supplement commercial, that's making all the money. How about just eating a carrot? There's a lot to be said about that, and the whole food form goes back to that saying you mentioned with that guy about a part of the. Also, I'm going to wrap up because I don't know how long Zoom's going to let me stay on this thing. Let's see if we answered all the other B12 supplements, calories, how much it take to reading, tell us about the, okay. How about your turn to share about the whole food nutrition course. People have to go to the website and the whole food nutrition course and sign up for that. You want to plug it a little bit?
Yeah, I will. Thank you. This course started because I was teaching at the time on campus at Cornell just prior to my taking my emeritus position. And it was called at the time vegetarian nutrition. I didn't care for that title too much, but that's what I was told to do, and that would attract some students. Well, it turned out to be very successful. It was quite popular with the students. But unfortunately, at that time, one of the key people on the campus who had kind of sold out to the dairy industry pulled it out of the catalog. It was kind of a nasty situation. We had our toe-to-toe arguments and that kind of stuff. But then I took it from the campus and put it over into this new online program that Cornell had just bought. Cornell, as a university, they set up a company with $2 million to start putting things online. In those days, online teaching wasn't very well known, wasn't too popular. So they thought, if I took my course, they said, go take it, put it over there. I think they were getting rid of me.
Yeah.
It turned out it was exactly the opposite, because we went there and then all of a sudden a lot of other faculty started putting courses there. Ours had been #1 all this time and still is #1. Now there's not just a for-profit initiative that was started out to be, now it's part of the university. So our course is doing very well. It's doing very well. And so we I don't know, we got at least 20,000 some graduates, with getting a certificate for it, right? And doctors and other professionals can actually get something like, we call it continuing medical education credits. So both professionals are able to take it, the professionals don't get this in medical school. They can take it and the public can take it. Most of the people are in the public one way or another. That course, as I say, it provided us some funding. I never took a cent, by the way. I have to say this. It was not a money-making venture for me. I've never taken 1 cent by way of a salary. So I got some younger people and others that the staff got together and we run that course. And it's all been very exciting. And so my daughter, 2 years ago, she has a doctorate in education and education curriculum. She worked with the Peace Corps, and she has a really pretty key experience. She really wanted to take our program and make it international. So now we've actually been giving out small grants to organizations around the world. Any kind of community that has an interest or maybe are involved in promoting this idea one way or another. Maybe they're involved in showing local people how to farm, how to grow vegetables. Maybe they're involved in, something else. It's really, and we just had 1 year of this new activity, this internationalization of the course. It's very exciting. And then the course also has been translated, and it'll be online here shortly, into Spanish. And there's 500 million people, Spanish-speaking people in the world. So our course is going to be in Spanish. And what it is, when I say a course, as you know so well, Paul, it's three, sort of a sequence of three courses, if you will. You get a presentation. I'm sure you can tell about your own experience. Get a presentation. You go, it's kind of interaction between the student and the instructor in a way. And so they go through it. And the idea was, from my perspective, I want to make sure that this course was as sound as we could make it in science. It's not, it's not the typical real science kind of course you get in the university, stuff like that. But it's enough for the average folk in the public to get some scientific grounding. So I think our course has a reputation now as being the best scientific-based course there is. There's all kinds of courses out coming up, but I think we've got the inside track on that story.
It's like the version of the whole food plant-based diet course.
Yes, exactly.
I like it.
We got another one's coming on just right about now. It's a new course we're adding to it on the food and environment.
Oh, okay.
And then still another, it's still kind of in planning stages, but they do it pretty fast, just on the concept of holism. What does that mean? When you look at nutrition from that perspective.
They're coming up. They're not now, right?
We're just starting to organize it right now. I got a bunch of lectures that I've given, and we'll try to pull it together and create that, as well. And so it's been very successful. And as I say, my daughter, I'm biased, I guess you could say, but she's a professionally qualified and doing exactly this. It's been terrific. We got a great team, at the organization right now, scattered around the country, and doing things here and abroad. The China study was partly sort of founded, I guess you could say that to some extent. That China study has now been translated. It's had sold more than 3 million copies, probably close to 4 million around the world. It's been translated into 50 foreign languages, which I think is a record, a world record for a book like that. So I'm lecturing all over the world right now, virtually. Before that, I was going there, but this idea is really catching on. And that course, come back to the course again, that's what we intend to do. We're trying to do the best we can do. Offer a course that is really based on science. There's so much confusion about nutrition out there in this society, let me tell you, as I'm sure you probably know. And the kind of nutrition that really gives us health on a broadest scale, both in preventing disease as well as in reversing disease, thanks to my colleagues and like Esselton and Ornish and McDougall and others. So we got the whole package. We got the whole package. And then in terms of the environment, that we're going to have a new one on that too. The number one cause of our climate problems these days is eating the wrong food. In other words, we're eating livestock by the billions. That's a cost to the earth, to the soil, everything you can imagine. And much of that started in the modern day at the World Bank some years ago, back in about 1998. I was invited actually to give a lecture at the World Bank, and at that time, and then they wrote a great paper saying at least 50% of global warming is due to the livestock. Since then, there's been some folks pushing back, like the industry said, no, it's not that much, not that much. But now there's some new stuff coming out. The majority of the climate change that we're seeing, global warming, is due to the consumption of livestock. That's simple.
Yep. I'm right on that. It's like the biggest part of the pie, you know, of climate change and global warming.
It is.
We're coming into a thing now with none of the environmental groups in my area were actually, I says, what are you guys doing for the diet? You know, that should have been the number one thing on the plate for every environmental group. And there wasn't any in all the volunteer work I did. So I got this group now. We're injecting ourselves into these events. And this month coming up, we're going to be having a big environmental caucus here in Sarasota. And
good, great.
I'm going for whole food plant. We're going to cater whole food plant based.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
How that turns out, and hopefully it's tasty and everybody starts going that way, because that's the answer right there. I don't need convincing. It's an absolute certain to me.
Can I give the address of that online program we have, just for those listening? It's one word: Nutrition Studies. That's plural. nutritionstudies.org. nutritionstudies.org. And so they go online, they get there, they can see what they can see. And we got some other stuff going in there too. They might be interested in it. So,
okay. I'm going to share the link to that in the, this will be uploaded to our YouTube page after the event.
Okay.
We want to, you know, people to see it at the event. And I'll share that on the YouTube page with the link as well, because we need to get people looking at that channel. But this is going to be this is a life commitment for me. I looked at the next course coming up. There's something, I can't remember what it is. Maybe it's about starting a vegan business or something, or.
The one that's coming up the quickest is almost right now is the one on the environment.
And when will that come out?
Pardon?
How long will that be?
Probably the same way, something like 18 lectures.
When will that come out?
I don't know. It's already done now. We had to kind of jump through some hoops administratively on that, you know, to get it established. But it's almost there. I'm sorry I'm not up to date. I should know that. But just go to that site, and you'll probably see some mention of it there.
Get an email mentioning, you know, this is going to be great. Greta Thunberg will probably, you know, like it as well as James Cameron.
Yeah.
So we're going to cut the recording off now. Stay on here, and I'll say goodbye to you after the fact. But I just want everybody to, you know, appreciate your being with us on this recording today. This will be on the YouTube page after the event, and look for that link and take the Whole Food Nutrition plant-based course, because it's awesome. It's very scientific. It's also scientific. I couldn't understand a lot of the, get a little lost in medical terminology and stuff, but I didn't need to. It was very simple enough to understand logically what I needed to do and how to follow it. And I took the Forks Over Knives cooking course to integrate it into my life. And now I'm transforming quite easily. It's going to probably take the rest of the year for me to get 100% in it. But I want to stay in it and educating myself as well as others in it. So I'll look forward to specifically this environmental one you got coming up. And that'll be the next thing I'll take then. So I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll see this later on the YouTube channel. Now, where do you stop the recording at? Oh, here's the button.